Ecuador is situated in the northwest of South America, directly on the equator, which gives the country its name. This diminutive land in the Andes is the smallest country in South America. Hardly any other land offers such great variety in such a small area. Ecuador attracts the visitor's attention not only with the immense mountain ranges of the Andes, but also with pure white sandy beaches and fascinating animal world. Ecuador is a land of volcanoes too. It offers the opportunity to climb 6,000 meters high snow-capped mountain peaks without having to clear a path through dense green jungle. Quito, the colorful capital of Ecuador, is located directly in the center of the country. The large Independence Place is the very heart of the colonial old part of town, which was declared a Site of World Cultural Heritage by UNESCO in 1978. Among other things, the plaza is surrounded by the government palace, which is both the Archbishop's and the administration's seat. Approximately 2.2 million people live in Quito, 40% of them not having reached the age of 14 yet. In the year 1526, the Spaniards conquered the land and Christianization began. As in many other countries, the different orders competed with one another and many magnificent churches were built. The La Campania Cathedral is the epitome of wasteful splendor. A miracle is said to have happened here 95 years ago. On the revered portrait of Maria, the eyes of the Virgin were said to have been watering. The Café Cultura is an oasis with vivacious character in the middle of the old part of town. This house used to be the residence of the oldest Quitos family, but it was converted tastefully into a hotel. The local artists arranged these rooms with impressive mural paintings to their own individual taste, so that each room has its own charm. Following the streets leading out of town of Quito, one passes numerous stalls with vast amounts of fruit and other different delicatessen and national specialities. However, those who have tender stomachs should be careful when sampling the cuisine on offer here. On the way to Otavalo, one passes a small village called San Miguel El Quinchel, whose patron saint of the same name is celebrated in lively style every year on September the 29th. It is a truly colourful spectacle when the whole village moves animatedly through the streets. The costumes are decorated in a costly fashion for this occasion. Every year, the village priest chooses one member of the parish who sponsors the whole feast, which means the costumes, the fireworks, the food and drink for 500 villagers during the 2 days. It is a great honour to be chosen, but it can also mean financial ruin. These flowers are for tomorrow, when we all go to the church service. And here are some caramels and sweets and so on. We will throw them at the people, then it looks like it is raining sweets. And all the villagers, meanwhile, try to catch them. Panamericana is the highway that originates in Alaska and passes through the whole continent. It is not used for road traffic only. Direct on the Panamericana, the Hacienda Pinsanqui is situated. It is worth visiting. This stylish country hotel in Imbabura has existed for 200 years already. It is not unusual to witness prominent guests in this hotel. Also, notably, Simon Bolivar, who is celebrated as the liberator of South America, may have spent a night here. An essential part of a real hacienda is an extensive garden. Plenty of trips can be undertaken into the surrounding area. Those who are able to ride should use the opportunity to choose a suitable horse in the stable of the hacienda and to explore the country. The small village of Peguche is the ideal place to obtain typical woven goods, as the village is famous for its highly qualified weavers. Nearly every inhabitant of the village is integrated into the weaving tradition up to old age, and according to old tradition, the thread is spun at the spinning wheel. The village has 500 inhabitants, and the loom must not be missing in any household. However, weaving here is pure man's business, and the more gifted a man is, the easier he finds a woman. Ultimately, we work to survive and to provide our families with food. And those who produce the best weaving products receive the best reputation, of course. Unfortunately, this reputation has been suppressed by industrialization during the last years. As you can see, I still work by hand at my wooden loom. This might look slow, but it is my style. Peguche is a real hot tip, for you would not find such high-quality products at any other market in Ecuador. Local religion is usually a mixture of ancient worship of nature and the inherent Christianity of the Spanish. If an Indian is ill or in personal crisis, he looks for a healer. With the help of Maria and the mountain gods, the patient should also be able to exorcise any negative energy. The patient is spat at with herbal spirits and hit with herbs to drive the coolness out of his or her heart. Raw eggs might be ideal to absorb the bad energy sources. And these petals might attract the joy of love. We also help the incurable patients, meaning those who will die soon. I clean them by means of a guinea pig. When I open the body of the guinea pig, I can recognize the disease on the basis of the entrails. And if possible, I give a suitable medicine to the patient. If it is not possible, the patients usually ask me to help them to a quicker death. Then I withdraw their bad energy so that they may die peacefully. Ecuador is a land full of myths and legends, and similarly the language and people are extremely flowery. There exists a myth of a volcano, Maria Isabella de las Nieves, personified as a beautiful woman. She is admired by the ugly but rich male volcano Manuel Imbabura. He gave her a lake as a present, and they got married. In the village of Cotatzachis, the villagers see themselves as their children, and they address these two volcanoes as mother and father. The original market in Cotatzachis takes place every weekend, and it has remained virtually untouched by tourism. At the markets, one can find astonishing things, such as some of the 700 or so types of potato that grow in Ecuador. Also, there is the opportunity to taste many typical kinds of fruit, vegetables and meat. All is freshly prepared, of course. One of Ecuador's most important export products are its roses. Since the land is situated directly on the equator, the sun shines here 10 to 12 hours a day, 365 days a year. Apart from that, there are no significant changes in temperature, and seasons as such do not exist either. The perfect conditions for rose growing. About 150,000 people are employed in this sector of industry. From planting to export at the airports themselves. Every single bud is covered with a small net. Due to the applied pressure, the roses bloom more fully and more handsomely. In 1998, the German institution Flower Label Program introduced their program to us and told us about the certificate we would receive if we correspond with their demands. Here it is. However, to receive it, we had to do a few things. The first point was, only those fertilizers and pesticides may be used that appear on the list of those suitable for the preservation of the ecosystem. The second point, we have to guarantee the safety of our employees and provide them with hand and mouth protection and eventual medical care. And thirdly, we have to care about the water we use, which means that we have to let it back into the earth in as clear a state as when we got it. The roses are sorted in the storerooms, since each country of export has its own particular taste and requirements. This rose goes to Russia, as it is large and has already bloomed. This flower goes to the USA, as the flower is somewhat smaller and partially closed. And this rose here is rubbish, since its heart is egg-shaped, which is unacceptable. Between 15 and 20,000 roses are sent each day from here to destinations around the world. Volcanoes are everywhere in Ecuador. One can admire Cotopaxi, the highest volcano located not far from Quito. A perfectly formed cone conceals a beautiful meaning in its name, the neck of the moon. From Quito, one can get to Ecuador's true highlight, the Galapagos Islands. TAME is the only airline allowed to fly to this archipelago in the Pacific. We land on the Santa Cruz Island, 1,000 kilometers east of the mainland. 96% of the islands are nature reserves. However, there are still small populated towns there. For example, Puerto Ayora. Every morning boats sail to these neighbouring islands, which number more than 50. Since the number of visitors in the sightseeing groups is limited, it is hoped that mass tourism will not blight the island's character in any way. Not having reached the island yet, one is already welcomed by the first islanders. In 1959, this island paradise in the Pacific was declared a strictly protected national park. The visitors are allowed to enter these islands only accompanied by an expert guide, and they have to walk on strictly designated paths only. The animals like to approach the people, who don't represent any danger, because these strict rules considering their behaviour are observed. Just like this iguana that consumes its food, a cactus fig, in peace. Charles Darwin arrived at these islands in 1835 during his circumnavigation of the globe. At that time, he could not have supposed that this archipelago would become an important object of his studies. Here he gained crucial findings for the development of his evolution theory. Originally, the islands were bare and unpopulated. However, in incredible long-haul flights, some birds overcame the 1,000-kilometer distance from the mainland to the islands. Even some small animals and reptiles managed to get here in the most curious ways, and they developed very differently on the separate islands. Whilst moving from one island to the next, the passengers can stay on board and get tanned by the equator sun. The most beautiful seashore on Santa Cruz is called Las Bajas, and this is where, with a bit of luck, one can bump into flamingos. All the islands here in Galapagos are of volcanic origin, and they are situated at the equator latitude. The lava rose constantly from a fissure at the bottom of the sea and moved up to the surface of the sea. The lava that came up to the surface of the water formed the islands. The islands are the highest points of the submarine volcanoes. The Galapagos Islands are located over the tectonic plate Nazca that slowly slowly moves from east to west to the extent of about 5 centimeters a year. That means that the youngest and most active volcanoes are in the west, namely Isabella and Fernandina, whereas the oldest islands are in the east and they are up to 4 million years old. The green turtle has its home here as well. After 55 days, the babies hatch out of the eggs, but unfortunately only 1% of them survive. Those who set out for the highlands of Santa Cruz have the opportunity to take a close look at the sea turtle which lives freely there. These animals weigh up to 350 kilograms, and they can reach the blessed age of 200 years. Besides, these reptiles gave their name to the islands, since the expression Galápago means saddle in Spanish, and it relates to the shape of their carapace, or shell. The visitor can come across natural curiosities such as this ravine that was created when a gas bubble burst. Because of its big spores, this plant is called the mother-in-law's tongue. Another possible trip at Santa Cruz is the Charles Darwin Foundation. There are twice as many birds resident in Ecuador as in the whole of Europe, Darwin's finches being among them, of course. There are young turtles being raised and poorly turtles being looked after in the Darwin Foundation.
The Charles Darwin Foundation has been in Galapagos for over 40 years now, and it's a scientific organisation who carries out studies on endemic species, on the threats to them, and we provide information to the local government authorities, the Galapagos National Park Service, so that they can make good informed decisions about how to protect the national park. So it's our job to find out what's going on in Galapagos and find answers to the problems.
Maybe the most beautiful island is Timor Norte. There can be hardly anybody who wouldn't be totally fascinated by the amazing richness and diversity of animals on this island. Goblins of the underworld. That is how Darwin described these lava lizards. Sea lions have a maximum of 1 baby a year. And this little seal was born just a few minutes ago. The placenta still lies next to it. Wild, strange and untouched is this landscape, where the lovely blue-footed booby looks for its nesting place. They observe their visitors curiously, and they build their nests without any inhibitions close to the visitors' paths. The older a blue-footed booby is, the more dark blue his feet become. Those who are lucky enough to be here between July and September can witness the mating rituals of these splendid man-o'-war, or frigate birds. By puffing up their red throats, the males try to impress the females. Countless nests of unsuccessful frigate birds line up close to one another in the balm trees. However, there are still some females who are simply not impressed by the behavior of these males. While we head for Rabida, we should take the opportunity to look over the captain's shoulder for a while. I was born here on the Galapagos Islands, namely on the San Cristobal Island. I am a descendant of the family Chill. My great-grandparents were among the first settlers of the Isabella Island. In 1905 they settled down there. My father and my mother were born on the Galapagos Islands as well. I belong to the fourth generation. As everyone knows, fresh sea air and walking around an island makes the visitor ravenously hungry. Before we anchor at the next destination, tasty food is served on board the ship. Our last destination is the Rabida Island. This isle is exactly 5 square kilometers large. A dozen sea lions bask lazily in the sun on the wide, dark red sandy beach. It is nearly impossible to return home from the Galapagos Islands without reams of unforgettable pictures. Those who don't catch the laziness of the sea lions on film should really go snorkeling. However, one should not be afraid of sea lions. They are just after a little close contact. One should take at least 2 weeks to visit the Galapagos Islands. However, those 2 weeks would still not be enough. Ecuador, a phenomenon of Latin America, one of the most beautiful, varied and safe lands on the continent, which can offer such a variety of contrasts, from the Andes to the volcanoes to the Galapagos Islands.